You're now listening to Sound Talent Media. Check out more shows at soundtalentmedia.com.
When you think about businesses that are selling through the roof like Skims or Allbirds, sure, you think about a great product, a cool brand, and great marketing. But an often overlooked secret is actually the businesses behind the business, making selling and for shoppers buying simple. For millions of businesses, that business is Shopify. It's home of ShopPay, the #1 checkout in the world. You can use it to boost conversions up to 50%, meaning way less carts going abandoned and way more sales going through to checkout. Upgrade your business and get the same checkout Allbirds uses. Sign up for your $1 per month trial period at shopify.com/income, all lowercase. Go to shopify.com/income to upgrade your selling today. Shopify.com/income.
This episode is brought to you by Nerds Gummy Clusters, the sweet treat that always elevates the vibe. With a sweet gummy surrounded with tangy, crunchy nerds, every bite of Nerds Gummy Clusters brings you a whole new world of flavor. Whether it's game night, on the way to a concert, or kicking back with your crew, unleash your senses with Nerds Gummy Clusters.
What is up, good people? Welcome back to another episode of the podcast. This episode is a little bit different than your normal episode because this is a lot shorter than your normal episode. But because of that, everybody is getting 2 episodes this week. I've been sitting on these ones for a little while. Well, unless you're subscribed to Patreon, then you've probably already heard these. Wink, wink. Yes, you've definitely already heard these. They're both with a couple of guitar legends, but they both were shorter just because that's all the time these busy fellas had. And this first one is with none other than Mr. Brian Ray. Brian is best known for playing guitar for, drumroll please, Mr. Paul McCartney. Yeah, that Paul McCartney. So while it is a little bit of a shorter episode, Brian is still an excellent conversationalist. We had a really, really great time chatting. He gets into his life, his career, and a lot of the things he attributes his success to. It's really, really a great conversation, and I think you're very much going to enjoy it. In the time since he came on, the rules around how you can share music on podcasts and stuff have changed. So while he does mention that there's going to be a track that you can hear on this episode, that's not exactly going to happen, but you should search for On My Way to You, which was released in November of 2022. So this is a little bit of an older episode, but I think you're really going to enjoy it. All of the stuff he says is evergreen. You're really, really going to like this conversation. How do I know? Because the supporters on Patreon really enjoyed this conversation, and they heard it pretty much fresh out of the oven. There is a lot of bonus material over there if you've combed through this entire back catalog already, or if you just want to support the show and get some extra bonus episodes, go over to patreon.com/tonemob, and for $5 a month, you will not only get the ad-free feed, but you'll get access to things like this when they drop. All right, folks, without further ado, let's get into this episode with Mr. Brian Ray. Hello, everyone. Welcome back to another episode of the Tone Mob Podcast, the show about guitar stuff, occasionally, sometimes. I'm your host, Blake Weiland, and with me today, I have none other than Mr. Brian Ray. What's going on, man?
Hey, Blake. Man, it was good to kibitz with you for a little bit before we got started here today. I really enjoyed that.
Yeah, I did too. That was great. Maybe, hopefully we can do it in person one of these days. That'd be even better.
Excellent.
Yeah, we'll put it on the calendar. Well, so for a lot of the young whippersnappers like myself that listen to this podcast, you know, I know some of them are going to be familiar with you because they're all guitar nuts, but I think people may be surprised. Obviously, Paul McCartney's who you're known for working with, but I mean, the list is long. Etta James, Smokey Robinson. I don't even know everybody you've worked with. You've worked with everyone, and I'm sure you've done a ton of interviews and digging deep into that back catalog of experience has been done a few times. But I thought might be fun to do with you specifically, since you have so much experience recording and releasing music with everybody under the sun and doing your own stuff, is, you know, what advice would you have for somebody trying to get started in the music industry as a guitarist these days?
Yeah, great question, Blake. I love that question because Man, I'm just a big proponent of music, and I'm a big proponent of independent music. But I am a really big fan of younger, aspiring guitar players, bass players, singers, keyboard players, drummers, and horn players, of course, string players, all of the musicians, for them to feel inspired and feel dedicated to music in a world that sometimes seems like it's less about live music than it used to be. Like when I was a kid, it was a great idea, great job. And now maybe some kids would have a little less hope about that, but I want to tell them all the young players out there, to don't stop believing, not to quote a Journey song, but to believe in yourself, to work hard. And I think the main thing that really worked for me is that I said yes to opportunities all the time that were really frightening, or that I thought maybe might be a little bit, under my, not on my wish list, but I would say yes to them anyway, and go and work hard. At an audition, at a jam night. I mean, I got a call well after I'd had a pretty good little career going. I got a call to do a blues night at a club, like a bar, for $6 for 3 sets of music. And I said, hell yeah, because it was going to be some good players and some friends I knew were going to come down. It was just like a hang. And no rehearsal, just go show up and play songs that we all should know. So much fun. Well, what came out of that was that the drummer was the musical director for a singer named Rita Coolidge, who had some big hits in the 80s of her own, but she goes back to Joe Cocker's Mad Dogs and Englishmen tour, you know? So she was on that stage playing with Joe Cocker back in the day, as he did Help for My Friends and Delta Lady and, all of those early live recordings of his. So he calls me up after the thing and goes, hey, our guitar player can't make a gig coming up. And I'd like to know if you'd like to come and substitute for him. And I said, hell yes. Turned into 4 years of work with Rita Coolidge, touring all over the world, like Japan 5 times, all because I said yes to a $60 blues gig that, some people might say, hey, I ain't going to do that. What is that, $20 a set? That might pay for a burger and gas, I did it because it sounded like fun and it sounded a little unusual. So I've got to say to all your followers, say yes. Say yes until yes is impossible.
Yeah. Yeah. I like that a lot. That goes, I just had a lady named Ayla on the show, and she does a lot of teaching. She has a big YouTube channel and everything, but she's also had opportunities to play with Willow Smith and some other big artists. And she said the same thing. Like, just say yes to as much as you can. Obviously, at some point, you got to be selective because there's only so many hours in the day. But, especially in the beginning, don't act like you're the hot shot and above anything, because you're not, first of all. And second of all, you never know what could come up. The thing that has led me to be able to even have a career in this business at all is relationships and knowing people, and sometimes making road trips that made no sense at all. Like, I'm gonna drive clear up 7 hours to go to this show for what? And it's like, you never know what could happen. And you don't want to overextend yourself, but I think that's fantastic advice. I love it when I hear people say that.
Yeah, it's so true, Blake. I mean, I can't say that enough. All of my jobs, to be honest with you, all of my jobs came from a willingness to do something either scary or, kind of but it was all a willingness. Some of these were auditions that scared me, and I didn't get every audition. I auditioned for Tina Turner in the 80s and didn't work out, and I was sad, but hey, man, I went to the next audition, and guess what? I got that one, Soon after that, I wrote a hit for Smokey Robinson, It's just like I'm asking of your audience, say yes to everything until yes is impossible.
I love that.
Yeah.
It's great. So back in the day, this is supposedly a gear podcast, but it usually just kind of goes all over the place. So as somebody who has seen, the coolest of vintage effects and amps and pedals and used probably more than I can imagine, all the way up to this proliferation of the digital technology finally actually being able to replicate some of this in a more realistic way. Like, how has your personal rig changed over the years when you're going gig to gig or recording session to recording session?
It's another great question, Blake. Well, I mean, I've done everything you can do with, well, not everything you can do with live approaches, but I've done a lot of the things we do. I started out as a guy who plugged straight in with a coily cord into a blonde Fender Bassman head and cab with a 1957 Les Paul.
Oh.
Now, that was my rig with Etta James for the first while. You can see videos of me playing that rig at Monterey Pop Festival in 1975. There I am with that Bassman. I traveled with it everywhere. Then I played a black bass super with her because reverb became desirable to have and a little bit of tremolo there. I didn't have any pedals. And then I got, my first, like SD1 or something like that, distortion pedal. And then I got, a Boss Chorus CE2.
Ooh, yeah.
All that stuff you do. I'm an older guy now. So, I mean, these things, I'm talking about 1974. This was my rig, the blonde Bassman with a gold Les Paul and a cable. That's it. And you see any videos of me and all these guys who played back then, their right hand is working furiously on the tone and the volume knobs.
Right.
And is moving up and down the area to get different tones. And you were just working with your hands to make the guitar do a whole bunch of tones. And what later happens, of course, is, then I got my first pedal board. It was one of those, powered, buffered Sesame pedal boards.
Yeah, yep.
In a little sort of a Tolex wood case. And I used that, and then I got a rack, and in my rack with a ground control with all preset shows in it. That was fun too, with a very clean pedal board with just a volume, a wah, and a big ground control and a tuner. That was my whole, board. And I've gone full circle, not all the way back to just a cable and a guitar, but with Paul McCartney, I use an old school pedal board, kind of like the Sesame, but bigger, with nice filtered power supply and a mixture of different needs from various pedals, in terms of milliamps and what kind of adapter is required, with just a volume control, a volume pedal, and that's my rig now. It's a stereo out, so I went back to the days of like the late 70s when I first discovered with my CE2 that you come out of the CE2 into 2 amps and you get this movement.
Oh, yes.
Well, I don't use the stereo chorusing much anymore. It's just not my thing, but I use it for tremolo. I use it for my ventilator Leslie cabinet going around in stereo. I use it for slaps. It goes da-da, between 2 amps, where you hear like a little rockabilly slap or a rock and roll slap where it just one repeat. Da-da.
Yep.
And that way it gives you a little bit of dimension and makes a solo kind of jump forward a bit. And a couple of stereo delays, but I'm not an 80s stereo delay guy where it's going ping-ponging around. That just sounds dated to me. So, but I love that. I've got some fuzz boxes on there, some various pedals with pitch vibrato and chorusing options, a reverb pedal, all sorts of stuff like that.
Nice.
Yeah.
Are you running ampless now, or are you running into amps still?
We're old school, bro.
Mm-hmm.
We got 2 amps up there going in stereo.
I love it.
Amplified Bri. I got two 23 watt divided by 13 It's called a BTR-23, and it's based on a KT-66, kind of like the earliest Marshall Plexi, which was KT-66 amp before they went to EL-34s.
Yeah.
And it's a really fine little sounding amp with a master volume that's very musical. And dude, I'm running like the gain at about 1 o'clock on both. One of them's a little hotter with a gain switch pulled out to get a bit more grind. But my master volumes are down at like 8:30, 9 o'clock.
Okay.
It's real, but still, you know what? It's a powerful little 23 watts. So two of them, it's quite loud.
Oh yeah.
They're cranked down pretty far to make the stage not too crazy loud.
For sure. Man, the Divided by 13 stuff I've seen for years, and that company is legendary in a lot of circles. And man, I've had the opportunity to play one a long time ago, and I wish I could remember the model, but it was a magical experience. That's very, very cool.
Well, the owner of that company and the designer is a guy named Fred Tacone, Tone. He's out in the Orange County area here in California. He's a real bud too. He's always like, we talk music, we talk guitars, we talk tone. And, he'll even take an old Stray, Fender, or Marshall amp of mine and tweak it up for me when he has a little extra time. It's not something he'll do all the time because he's busy building amps. It's just a real bro, and he's got a bunch of designs. He's got everything from, EL-84 based amps, EL-34 based amps, 6V6 based amps, and this KT-66. So he's got sort of the whole tone array available, but they're all hand-wired, super buff, and they're tour ready.
Yeah.
They're not like a vintage amp would be.
That's the thing is you gotta love vintage amps. They're just so they've got the vibe, they've got the feel, they look great, especially when they're all beat up and used. But man, you're running a risk of going down during a show, and it's not something, especially you playing with Paul, can necessarily run the risk of doing these days.
Exactly. They don't want to assume that risk, nor do I.
No.
Hi, I'm Vincent, and I'm here to talk about the Merit Mercury X. My dad's always going on and on about how cool Merit is. He really went off on one about the Mercury X the other day. He said something about a 4,800 hertz sample rate and 99 preset locations and 33 banks, and something along the lines of the most advanced reverb pedal ever devised by man? That's all true, but I only care about one thing. This pedal sounds sick. So make sure you check out the Mercury X and all the other fine products at Maris.us, as well as fine retailers worldwide. All right, Dad, now can I have my Pocky?
How exactly do artists get their music on Spotify, Apple Music, Deezer, Tidal, all these services? How in the world do you get your music there? Well, in the past, you had to use something called a record label. But these days, you can use DistroKid. DistroKid is the absolute easiest way to get your music up on streaming services, and it's the most affordable way to do so. Not only do plans start at $22.99 for the entire year, that's less than $2 a month, DistroKid also does not take a cut of your streaming revenue, unlike some other services out there. Even better if you sign up by going to tonemob.com/distrokid. That's tonemob.com/distrokid. One more time, that's tonemob.com/distrokid. You'll get 30% off. That's right, 30% off their already extremely reasonable prices. So go to tonemob.com/distrokid and get your music out there.
Hi, I'm Daniela Clark.
I'm Barbara Ann Wild.
And we are the Honest AF Show. Our podcast is real, honest conversation with our celebrity friends and pros,
covering our anything but average rock and roll lifestyles,
all while tackling the hell that is aging and the battle of beauty.
Oh yeah, nothing is off the table.
The Honest AF Show is available wherever you get your podcasts.
Hello there. I'd like to introduce you to your new best friend, the Chase Bliss Audio Lossy. Lossy is a collaboration between Chase Bliss and Goodhertz. And it's meant to give you some control over those weird digital artifacts that come with very compressed audio. You're hearing it right now. All the changes that are taking place are strictly coming from my playing dynamics. I'm just interacting with the pedal and letting it do its thing. In some true stereo goodness. If you'd like some more details about Lossy, I'd invite you to head over to chaseblinssaudio.com. You're gonna like what you find.
So going back, and I'm sure you've been asked this question a bunch of times, but how did you get the gig with Paul? Because I mean, arguably the most influential musician living currently. That had to have been quite an experience.
Well, yeah. So it's a long story, but I'll try and give you the thumbnail version of it. I had been working in France at a really nice gig, working for two different artists, funny enough, like complete polar opposites. A dude named Johnny Hallyday, who had been famous since 1960, and a woman named Mylène Farmer. Both French singing, French speaking, French only places. And she was more known in the late 80s and 90s in France. So you think of her as being more like a Lady Gaga, and you think of him as being more like Elvis.
Okay.
That's how you could think of these two guys.
Got it.
People, sorry. And the drummer on both of those gigs, who won the audition for both of those gigs, was none other than Abe Laboriel Jr., Paul McCartney's incredible, fiery, talented musical drummer, singer extraordinaire. Anyway, so when I got those gigs, there's Abe Laboriel, who's been chosen to be the drummer, and we just kind of became good buds on the road. We'd go out and eat food and walk around on days off and go see a funny movie and eat a bunch of junk food. It was my bud. And a couple of years later, he decided he'd be staying home and was going to instead work with Katie Lang, American singer-songwriter, which he did do. So he was going to leave the French world behind after, I've been touring with him for years over there, going between artists back and forth between those two artists. So now he decides to stay in town. And good thing he did, because he gets a call to go and record an album with Paul McCartney. And the producer on that album, and many to follow, was a guy named David Kahne, Kahne. And he had big hits with like Sublime and the Bangles and Pearl Harbor and the Explosions, a lot of cool stuff dating way back to San Francisco New Wave days. Well, Abe did this album, and the guitar player on it was Rusty Anderson. And when it came time that Paul was ready to play a show live, they did the 9/11 tribute concert for New York. That was the first time Abe and Rusty were on stage with Paul, as far as I know. Yeah, it was. And then soon after, Paul started plotting to possibly doing a tour. But before that tour, he was going to play one song for the Super Bowl. And it was a pregame song, not halftime show. We did that later. pregame one song called Freedom from his Driving Rain album that David Kahn had produced. And to do it, he was going to need to fill out that lineup a little bit. And so before that happened, Abe is at my birthday party. We're at a restaurant in LA. And I said, dude, are you going to play live with Paul? And he goes, yeah, we are. I said, wow. I said, well, wait, who's going to play bass when he plays piano and guitar and then switch to guitar when he's on bass? And he goes, yeah, good question. We're looking for a guitar player that plays bass. And rather than a bass player who plays guitar, I guess that a distinction he made.
Mm-hmm.
I
know a guy. Yeah, I know a guy.
Love a shot at that.
Yeah.
That's what I'd love a shot at that. And honestly, Blake, it was a little unusual for me because I'm like, hey, they know where to find me. I've been doing this a long time. I get all, anchor man. But truth, I stuck up for myself and said, I would love a shot at that. Declared it right there, put my hand in the air. And Abe said, hey, cool idea. Well, I'll put your name forward. And he didn't say, you're the guy or anything like that. He just said, I'll put your name forward. It wasn't his hire. But he gave my name to David Kahn, who was charged with hiring the right guy. Now, I'd never met David before, but he calls me like a day or two later after my birthday where I said that and said, hey, Brian, it's David Kahn. I went, oh, cool. And he goes, can you come down to my office and meet? I'd like to talk to you about possibly playing one song with Paul McCartney. And I was like, yeah, with them and sitting on the couch, just he and I. I'm playing a little bit of guitar. Then he hands me a bass, and I'm playing a little bit of bass, but we're talking the whole time, just chilling. No big deal, no big audition. And he said, hey, man, this has been really fun. I got to get back to work, but I have a good feeling about this. I'll tell you what, I'll put your name forward. I have no control over the outcome. There's other people being called. Good luck. And I get a call the next day from Paul's office saying, we would like you to come to New Orleans to play one song with Paul McCartney. Can you leave, on the noon plane? I was like, I was so excited. And so that turned into what is now, I'm in my 21st year with Paul.
Wow.
Yeah.
One show.
That Super Bowl was kind of an audition to then go to rehearsal for what was going to be his first 6-week tour in a very long time. And that's the part where, the stakes got higher because he had only played one song with me. So it was kind of a big deal. I was still very, very nervous for that. But it worked out because here I am. And that was saying yes and also advocating for myself. So to your listeners, that's it. Don't ever play cool. Don't ever think, oh, they know where to find me because I'm a badass. Don't ever assume. You have to advocate for yourself, but not be obnoxious. That's all. Person to hang out with. Because to all your listeners, so much of it is about comfort and hang. Is this person fun to hang out with for 6 weeks straight? That's an important aspect. So you can't be all full of yourself or all, quiet or all weird. You've got to be social a bit. And so that's another aspect of it.
That's something that's came up a few times. I had a good conversation with a guy named Brian Nutter, who is in Nashville, and he makes guitars now, but he, for a long time, was one of the go-to sidemen, for lack of a better term. Every big country artist that played through there is oh yeah, we got to call Brian. And that was one of the pieces of advice he gave, was exactly the same thing. He's like, you got to be cool, man. You're going to be locked in a little tube with these people for 6 weeks or longer. And you got to be cool. The people who aren't get weeded out really, really fast, generally.
Yeah, that's so true. Yeah, Paul has good taste, and he deserves to be surrounded by people he likes and people who are good at what they do. So what you end up with on a Paul tour, for instance, and any of these bigger players, is people who want to get called back again.
Right.
And who do with Paul McCartney, because guess what? He's Paul McCartney, and he's awesome. And so you get people who are on good behavior and all of whom are ready and willing to work 110%, not 60%, not 50%, not cutting corners, but 110%. When you have a whole crew of people doing that, guess what? That show is going to be awesome.
Yep. Because they, like you said, can you be on the noon flight to play one show? It's like, oh yeah. Oh, I can definitely be on that flight. I don't care where I am. I'm going to make that flight. I'll be there. And Paul definitely is one of the few that can command that kind of action from people. But I think taking that attitude as much as possible to whatever you're doing is also a good way to get called back, no matter what it is that you're doing.
I think you're right. Yeah.
Yeah. It's and I mean that for music or any kind of art, or plumbing. Like trying to have as good of attitude as you can going into whatever it is your work is going to get you the calls back, I think.
You know what? That's so true. I'm glad you said that because, we're here speaking to, musicians and musicians who are hopeful to have great careers in music. But this goes to anybody. If you want to be at a great gardening or a, like landscape company, if you want to be at the best plumbing company or machine shop, you just be cool, man. Work hard and be cool. That just goes across the board. Don't be a dick.
Mm-hmm.
That's my other thing.
Yep.
Say until yes is impossible and don't be a dick. It ain't complicated.
I literally avoided getting laid off in 2008 because the guy and me and the other guy that was just as good of a mechanic as I was, we were all both on the chopping block because it was 2008. And they were like, well, he's not very nice and Blake's pretty nice, so we're going to let him go. And, and that was the only difference between us. We both got hired at the same time. We both had approximately the same skill level. And I got told later, I was like, oh, yeah, it's because nobody likes him.
Like, oh, wow.
Yeah.
Well, there you go, Blake. You're a good dude. I'll tell you, before we even got our sort of like time to get to know you a little bit before we started while I was snacking. But, yeah, look, I mean, I can't tell you how many of these opportunities that happened for me that led to where I got were as a result of someone not being available for a job. But Rita Coolidge, Paul, Etta James, they don't have time for that. I was called in to play on a jam for Etta James because her guitar player wouldn't come or couldn't come to a daytime jam. That was it. That was the last time that dude ever played for her.
Wow.
Yeah.
Wow.
Yeah.
Hello out there. Hi, I'm Hal Schwartz.
And I'm Flynn McLean. We want to tell you about our podcast, None But the Brave, which is dedicated to taking a deep dive into the work of Bruce Springsteen.
We're currently in our 5th season. Our latest episodes focus heavily on Bruce's 2024 tour and have featured such guests as Anthony Castrovince from MLB Network and Barstool's Kirk Minahan.
We're also covering the 40th anniversary of Bruce's biggest record, Born in the USA. And as part of that, coming up this week, Uprock's cultural critic Stephen Hyden returns to the show for a fascinating hour-long conversation about his new book, There Was Nothing You Could Do, Bruce Springsteen's Born in the USA and the End of the Heartland.
To listen, you can go to our website, mbtbpodcast.com, or subscribe on your preferred podcasting platform.
We hope to see you further on up the road.
Thank you so much. We'll be seeing you.
Hey, this is Dewey Halpus, host of Peer Pleasure on the Sound Talent Media Podcast Network. Join me each week as I explore another long-form conversation with one of your favorite musicians, actors, comedians, or creatives. From Chino Moreno of the Deftones, John Gorley of Portugal the Man, to Fat Mike from NoFX and Ian MacKaye from Fugazi and Minor Threat, we go all over the map. From Fall Out Boy to Slayer, Peer Pleasure has it all. Check us out now on Sound Talent Media.
And going back to that a little bit, mentioning Etta James specifically, it's interesting to me that, she was huge. She's one super influential, possibly one of the best vocalists of all time. And even from going to her gigs to Paul's, you mentioned you were nervous about that, which is also very interesting. you still retained that.
Yeah, I mean, also, to be honest with you, Blake, I also went through some times in my life where I started getting full of myself, I mean, I guess that's kind of a temptation for anybody who reaches success, even though mine wasn't overnight. I worked very hard from a young age. And I had to learn some lessons. I had to get humbled and humble myself. But this is all in the, sort of, I don't know what you would call that. You would call that sort of, trial by fire and, testing your mettle, and like a sword that gets strengthened over fire and being hammered. Well, I put myself in a position to get roasted on the fire and get hammered a little bit, but it made me stronger. So I could have screwed up and just said, screw it, I'm too good for that. I could have done something dumb, but guess what? I stuck in there,
And sticking with it, that's another thing that I say this on the podcast, and I talk about it with a lot of friends, and I think it's true for just about any endeavor. But the best new artist category in any award show always cracks me up, because oftentimes it's almost never the case that I've seen where it's been like they're actually a new artist. It's like, oh, well, they've been touring for 10 years, but they're the best new artist, and it's all, it comes back to that classic, 10 years to an overnight success story that seems to be the case with 99% of artistic endeavors for sure. And I'm sure you can speak to that. You mentioned you worked very hard for a long time.
Yeah, I mean, absolutely true. It just, it's been an opportunity of a lifetime. And what can I say, man? I've been very, very fortunate just to hang in there. Could have gone a number of ways, but I just hung in there.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah.
That's I've, again, repeating myself, but for the listeners, but not to you. I was standing by Josh Scott from JHS Pedals, arguably one of the biggest boutique, builders of pedals in the country. And he had another builder come up to him at NAMM, and he said, hey, do you have any advice for somebody just starting out or who's only been at it for a couple of years? And he said, stick around, man. He's like, if you can just stick around, you're going to be doing better than 99% of people,
that's absolutely it. I mean, I love that.
Yep. It's something I didn't expect to hear, and it took me a minute to process what he meant, but having stuck around for a little while now, I have seen how people fall by the wayside, and you got to really want it. That's the thing.
You do have to really want it, man, and work hard. We worked so hard with Paul. I worked so hard with Etta, with Smokey, with all the things I did. I work so hard in my own life, in my own solo career, from the singles that I do. I'm working hard right now, hanging out with you and talking shop. It's fun, but it's also me investing in my career. I have a single coming out soon on Wicked Cool Records, and it's called On My Way to You. In fact, it might be out by the time you air this interview.
What's the date? When's it coming out?
Black Friday, bro.
Oh, boy. Well, maybe
when are you going to launch?
Maybe I'll put it out on Black Friday.
I think that would be super smart. If you do, you could premiere my new single, On My Way to You.
Let's do that.
Little Steven Van Zant's Wicked Cool Records.
Let's do that. See, look, listeners, we just made that plan right now. We didn't talk about this beforehand. So look what can happen when you just do things.
Well, let's do that. Blake, this has been a super pleasure. I got to roll down the road. Like I said, I got to make my escape. But thank you so much for your interest and for this lovely chat. And I bid a fond adieu to you and to all of your friends.
Thank you very much. I hope to talk to you soon. And we're going to cut to that song now.
Okay, thanks. So good, man. Thanks so much.
Yep.
All right, folks, I hope you enjoyed this episode as much as I enjoyed recording it. Again, if you want this stuff when it drops, because there are occasionally shorter but really great episodes that don't fit the normal format, go over to Patreon, where you can get extra bonus episodes with that week's guest or sneaky little bonuses like this once in a while. And I really, really appreciate everyone who's done that. Thank you so much. And if you can't do that, I totally understand. But if you could tell a friend about this show, that means the world. It is huge, 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 huge. So to everyone that's done that, thank you from the bottom of my heart. And to everyone that's going to do that, thank you as well. I really appreciate you. It's the reason I'm able to keep doing this show after almost a decade, which is kind of wild to say, but it's true. So thank you all so much for the support. I appreciate you. And I have a very special extra episode coming up right here in your podcast feed here in not all that long, probably just a day or two. Kind of depends on my schedule, but definitely before the end of this week as this episode drops. So here in just a few days, maybe even tomorrow, we'll see what happens. I've got a lot on my plate. I'm still catching up post NAMM. So anyway, I'll get out of your hair, but I will talk to you on the internet very, very soon.